everybody, and welcome back to the LaFlamme Throwers, NFL news, notes, and takes. And we have a great show for you guys today, something that I think will be very interesting that not many people have talked about. As it stands right now, it's Saturday, day 3 of the NFL draft, and we are right now in round 6. And so that's obviously a great opportunity for your teams to make valuable picks still and whatnot. But I will tell you, an underrated part of the NFL draft is actually the period right after the draft, free agency. And so we'll go to Steve. Steve, you know about free agency, and you've got some notable free agents.
You bet. Yeah. And as you said, the draft is in round 6. I'm sure we'll be recapping that, but it's a really interesting thought. I'm looking forward to today's topic with undrafted free agents, because I'm not sure if many people realize how many household NFL names were not drafted. The NFL draft started in 1936 at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and has evolved into what it is today. But I do want to read a list of names that all went undrafted and then were signed after the fact as undrafted free agents, because some of these might surprise you. Wes Welker, Tony Romo, Priest Holmes, Rod Smith, Antonio Gates, London Fletcher, Jeff Saturday, Kitch, one of your Colts, James Harrison, Adam Vinatieri, Kurt Warner, even Warren Moon. We can go all the way back to Lou the Toe Groza in 1946, coming out of Ohio State, that was an undrafted free agent. So when a lot of this magic is made, when the rounds are over, there are going to be a lot of great stories coming out of that. And I'm intrigued to hear how that process goes. So let's not forget about the fact that the undrafted free agents could still be tomorrow's superstars.
Yeah, you know what, Steve? I agree. This is a portion of the NFL draft that I always love to see. And I have lots of questions because the draft is just very, very transparent as it takes place. But the free agency part really has a lot of mystery to it. You just kind of look the next day and you see 20 or 30 free agents that you brought in. So let's bring in our good friend Frog, former scout, and ask Frog. Frog, tell us, how does this free agency process work?
So if you are, let's say, experienced, or you're coming from a place that values it, the origins of laying the groundwork can even date all the way back to you might be working at the bowl games, your Senior Bowl, your East-West Shrine game, and so on. So to create those relationships, because, hey, this guy might be an undrafted free agent. I want them to get to know me. And so that way, if they get a phone call at the end of the draft where the player is a little devastated and the agent's a little upset, they know who you are. And then you start making those phone calls literally right now. So right now in the 5th, 6th round, not quite in the 5th, because people have a little bit of egos. But in the 6th or 7th round, you might start calling the player, start calling the agent, and you're going to say, hey, I love your player. I'm fighting for him. But if I can't get him drafted here, we love him. Just remember me. Remember, and da-da-da. So you start creating those relationships, and a lot of teams have been very creative. We could be sending mailers or whatever it may be to hey, look at how much success we had. But you want to temper it because everybody has dreams of getting drafted. So you kind of play that delicate dance time. If you are very thoughtful and timely with your questions, you can kind of set it up to where more or less you don't want to say, hey, we're thinking about you as an undrafted free agent. You can go, hey, Steve North, have you looked at everybody's roster situation just to get an idea of how it fits? And that's a way that you can.
Yeah. So, Frog, question for you then. So do the scouts actually act like recruiters for these players?
A lot of the better scouts, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You start turning into recruiter. And again, in my opinion, people cultivate those relationships months in advance. But if you, let's say, you don't start that process, you might be trying to do the recruiting literally like that 7th round, or as soon as if you start making the phone calls when the draft is over, you already lost them, because that player has anywhere from 1 to 8 teams calling them, and the agents receiving all those phone calls. And you got to realize you just don't go like one at a time. Like, we need 4 wide receivers. There could be 6 different people calling wide receivers. So you are in a time crunch like no other. And you're not allowed to technically have an agreement on undrafted free agency before the draft is over. So air quotes, technically.
So I was going to say, you're kind of getting into a curiosity that I have, which is, college athletes obviously are not allowed to have interactions with agents, I presume scouts and things along those lines. When does it start? And you don't need to, I'm not trying to uncover any dirt with how it can happen in the scouting world, but is it the combine? If you're a scout at the combine, is part of your goal to network with the guys outside of the drills, to do anything to form a relationship? When does that point start? Right when they hire an agent? How do you do it? I mean, how do you recruit as a scout before the draft?
Oh, that's a good question. So a lot of it is, if you go into a school, like a lot of times, and let's say it's a smaller school, they're going to know who you are. So that's helpful because like they've seen your face. If you're at like a school like Ohio State, where there's a ton of people at all times, scouts and so on, and you just try to be very crafty, but a lot of it is you might initiate those like pre-planning recruiting-esque conversations. Depends upon your relationship with the agent, but sometimes you could just like have those conversations with the player. Literally, if you ask some very craftful questions, you can get an idea of the intention of the player, and you would be shocked. It ranges from all over to like those that are very knowledgeable and understanding of their possible draft stock. Could be somebody that you wouldn't think you would have an overinflated ego, and then those that you think are super humble are the ones that are like shocked when it's the last pick in the 7th round and they didn't have any sort of plan that they'd be an undrafted free agent.
And how competitive can it get between scouts? Because being in sales, everybody's going for the same clothes, so there's obviously a competition between reps working for different companies. Is that the same in the NFL? If you're a scout that's got your eye on a certain free agent and there are several other teams and their scouts do too, do rivalries form in the scouting circuits to try to get the services of those guys, or what does that look like?
Yeah, you bet your ass it's competitive. It really is. It reminds me of like trading places on the Wall Street Exchange, people screaming, and you gotta realize, like, if it's all your scouting staff and you have a scouting staff of 10 plus people, different phone conversations going all over, and you're trying to bring in a coach to help recruit, and then this person's on the phone, and then there is some territorial parts because a lot of people are scouting the same areas, and you're just fighting for all that you can. So it's very, very competitive, and it can give you a rush, or it can leave you a little flustered because you think you have an agreement, and then all of a sudden it doesn't go that way. So you need 3 parts to have it fall into place. You need to have the player to agree, the agent to agree, and then also your contract person who's keeping tally, because while you're on the phone call with that wide receiver, you could walk on over and be like, I got one. He's like, we're now filled that wide out. And it's like, oh, okay. And then next, you got to make another phone call to another position.
So, Frog, let me ask you, what are some of the limitations on what you as a scout can do? Can you take these guys out because their eligibility is up? Can you take them out to dinner, try to do anything to form that relationship? Or is it just kind of just a 5-10 minute exchange when you're there seeing them at the facilities?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Different teams approach it different ways for how to do like the pre-draft process. So some people might bring in like that top guy or their top players that they're thinking about drafting to spend more time. Other people would bring in undrafted free agents, A, to get the physical for sure, but B, to use it as like a little bit of recruiting tools where they can spend a lot of time with the position coach. And then you play that card if that person becomes undrafted. Like, remember you spent that time at our facility and you got to know our coach, and hopefully you got the coach talking to the kid. Maybe you'll try to put the head coach on. You got to remember that undrafted free agency window after the draft, like when you can technically start signing the contracts, it really will dry up within like probably 2 hours. Now, granted, you can go the next day and still keep calling people, but it goes quick.
What are the advantages for these kids to sign so quickly? I mean, do teams have limited numbers that they can do, or do you? Why is it that a kid doesn't go, you know what? Let me just, if I've got 10 or 15 different offers, let me sit back and think about this for a day.
That is a wonderful question, and that was something to where I wondered, like, why don't some players like take a step back or the agent and then just look at the field of offers? And I know that has happened during the past. I can't think of any players in specific. But the thing is, though, let's say your team only gives you, this was back when I was around, hey, you only have $50,000 worth of, signing bonus money to give to sign, let's say they want 20 players. That money can just disappear, and you're not the only organization. And you can't just free will spend on open competition because you have a certain salary structure like parameters for like that year's draft allotment. So you can't like give a guy like a $75,000 signing bonus.
Frog, I have another question for you. I imagine that not getting drafted is one of the biggest emotional hits these human beings take, in the 22 years they've been on the planet. And it would be pretty tough to have to pivot from not being drafted to entertaining free agent offers. So my curiosity is, do you have some guys that really do not handle that well to the point that you've made an effort to work with them as an undrafted free agent, but they're so full of bitterness or down or angry that you changed your mind and decided to step away?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good question, to where like some players, you can tell emotionally they are shocked. And again, let's say you have your board and you have 5 guys for one slot. And if you realize your player isn't going to make any sort of decision, or he's just like very upset, or if an agent's being irrational, we're calling the next person because we don't got a lot of time. If I got to try to mend your hurt feelings for more than a few minutes, we have to move on, and we communicate that very well. Well, at least I did, and other people would, because we got to keep going. But that's why you start sending those like basically buffer text messages during this time right now, in like that 6th, 7th round, and not flat out like, hey, you're not going to get drafted, but like, do you have a plan? Start looking at the rosters. Here's how you fit for our team. And then it can be very hurtful to where you tell somebody to look at the roster and how they can fit and make your team, and then you draft a guy at that same position in the 7th round. That's not him.
So, Frog, sounds like a mad scramble. How in the heck does a team prioritize players during this time and communicate who's agreed, who's not agreed? I mean, I can imagine a team could end up with 10 receivers and 2 offensive linemen if they're not on the same page. How does that take place?
Yeah, so it really, now this part, it's actually looked the same between the 3 organizations I worked at. Your cap person and maybe your president will be like sitting separately, and you'll go, hey, I have Steve North, he agrees. And they'll go, okay, what to what? A $5,000 signing bonus. It fits, okay, we'll fax it right to the agent, or probably now they just email PDF it right to the agent. And that's, you'll have like a central base that is going to more or less tell you if you can or can't. And occasionally it can be very sensitive because 2 people could be walking up with a player that's the exact same position and there's only 1 slot left. And then that part is where this is a grown man's profession. That part is where that president or the GM or someone will go, we'll take him over him, and then move on.
And do you ever have a situation where a player's on the phone with one team and the agent's on the phone with the other, and they're trying to bid up the number? And then second of all, do the scouts determine that initial offer, or are they conversing with the money guy saying, hey, can I go 10,000 on this guy? And the money guy's going, no, 5,000. Or does the scout have the autonomy to set that number based on their experience?
So again, you're going to communicate to how much money you have. So that is set. And sometimes because we all have egos, but your egos get a little bit stronger because you're like, I think this player can make it. And that's where you feel like your best as a scout when your undrafted free agent guy makes it. But if they're like 5,000 hard line, that's it, then it's 5,000 hard line, that's it. Doesn't matter what scout you are, you can't go, man, I'll pay the other $3,000 to make it more, to match it. You can't. That's a salary cap infraction. So that part is tough. And there are some, there is a lot of flying around of like chaotic, hectic. And I loved it because you got to be very quick. And that part was very thrilling. It was great. And I'm happy. I love taking part in it, but I couldn't imagine doing it every day.
Do they bid you up though? I mean, will you have a scout or a agent on one line and the player on the other, and they're basically playing you against another team?
Absolutely. And absolutely, they'll bid it up like, hey, Chicago bidded $5,000. Packers are offering $10,000. And then you just got to sell your roster, because what's most important is actually making your team as opposed to that signing bonus. That signing bonus is like literally next to nothing compared to the actual making the team of the minimum salary. So like the roster part is of what's most important. And when a player and an agent get that part, then your conversations become a lot easier. And that's where it feels pretty sweet, to where you have a player that will take less signing bonus money to sign with you, because it's like, oh, awesome, they get it. It's not because they like me, or they might like you, but I mean, they get the overall big picture. But yeah, you'll have agents working to bid it up. And actually what you'll have right now is some agents telling teams, well, if you don't draft my player, I'm not going to send them to you. And that's how you get some of these 6th, 7th rounders drafted, because some people want them as undrafted free agents, and the agent's telling them, well, you need to draft them because I'm not going to send them to you. So go draft them. You have like 4 draft picks, and then we'll share a story one time where I had that happen to me with a good friend, and player got drafted because of that.
So for all of you, touching on an area that I was about to ask about, which is drawing on your own personal experiences, whether you simply want to say yes or no, or get into more details. Did you ever have an experience where there was an undrafted free agent that you really wanted and couldn't get for whatever reason? There's a similar player another scout wants, just short of the salary cap flexibility to do it, whatever it may be, that really stuck with you, and then you went on to see that player become a very solid NFL contributor. Are there any stories you have or experiences you had where, man, there was a fish that you really wanted that you had to let off the hook, and you felt like it came back to hurt you in the long run?
Yeah, I didn't have any that I felt like that I had lost to where, ooh, that really hurt. Now, I had some because I was at Ohio State, and then I went to the Chicago Bears. So I had some Ohio State players that I had a relationship with. I'd known for some years, and I felt it were friends. Well, when they didn't get drafted, I was like, hey, man, I'm going to guide you the right way. I know I work for a team, and they weren't having none of it. And I wasn't hurt or offended. I was a little too new in understanding like the whole draft process, but that was like one of those interesting parts. But as far as where I had to where I helped get a player get drafted, I wasn't pissed because I was happy for my friend who was the agent. But at the same time, I was like, this guy's going to be a good football player, and we screwed the pooch because we should have taken him anywhere from rounds 6 and 7.
Okay. So going back to your comment about the Ohio State players that, weren't having any of it when you tried to tell them you were there to help guide them through it. Why is that, out of curiosity? Because I would think that they would want to catch on with a team, and having a buddy that's with the Bears and a potential team for them to land with. What was it about that process that caused them to be disinterested in your offer?
I think a lot of it is hurt ego. And at the same time, that player took a lot more signing bonus money than what we are offering. So that part was So if you now are going to become undrafted free agent, all you're guaranteed is your signing bonus, which basically almost every NFL player, that's about the same coming in as a rookie. So this person looked at like, well, I'm about to get like 4 times the signing bonus money. Why don't you give me that money? And then it's like you're backtracking because, well, I can't. And we have set limits. It's like, well, don't you want me? And then it's like, we do. Trust me. And it's like, and deep down inside, because I also I cared about those guys at Ohio State. I'm thinking like, touche.
Right. Okay. Makes sense.
Now, Frog, you alluded to something really interesting there about how the scouts and the agents are friends. Is there actually a collegiality between scouts and agents out there, or is it kind of an adversarial thing? Is it sort of a frenemy thing? What are the roles of scouts and agents?
Well, it really should be. You're not part of the same team, but you're part of like the overall same ethos of the NFL. So you should be very much so create relationships. And there's some agents you're just not going to get along with, and then there's some that you're going to be very good friends with. And the best thing is to not look at agents as like being these horrible people. They're representing their clients. I've seen that change over the years, because I know when I first started, people didn't have the best view of agents, and then over time, it's just like, hey, they're part of the same thing. So we're going to treat them well, and then we'll let them know about some players if they ask, give our honest opinion, for the hopes to where they can maybe help you out in the future for undrafted free agency.
Were there any agents that teams or scouts or general managers would want to avoid? You don't have to name names, but I'm just saying, were there some that they would just say, nope, we're not going down that road?
There has to have been, yes. Just some agents that you were like, they're too pie in the sky as far as what they'll ask for their player who's an undrafted free agent. And then obviously that probably will also play into possibly to where even drafting, if you for some reason, like you have 2 guys tied and you think, whoa, this could be tough. But now what the NFL did is like, there's no reason to ever hold out with your rookie contract. So that part has kind of become outdated. But I mean, that did come through people's minds. But for undrafted free agency, if you're like, yeah, this agent's only going to want the highest amount of signing bonus, or I can't trust him at his word that he's going to send his player after we commit and I let all these other players go, we won't even make that phone call.
And Frog, you also mentioned the fact that the teams have a specific amount of free agency money. Is that set by the NFL, or is that adjusted off of the total cap? So in other words, could a team like the Colts say, you know what, we feel like we're very successful in free agency, we want to set that number at $400,000, and then a team like the Bengals may say, look, we want to spend most of our money on our current players and draft picks, we're going to set that level at $100,000.
Each team gets a draft rookie pool, and that is also includes your undrafted free agency. Now, I don't know if the newest CBA is going to have something that's going to be to where teams can be a little bit more cavalier in spending, but you have your draft rookie pool, and that includes your drafted picks and undrafted free agents. And if you put more money into the undrafted free agency part, you're taking some of that money away from your draft picks. And again, some of those things they might have changed up, but you can't have a team be cavalier and go, we're going to spend $300,000 on undrafted free agent signing bonus contracts. And the thing is, it can be empty money, because if those guys don't make the team, you just now like basically threw money away. So you want to be smart with that investment. So that's why if you invest low and they hit, you feel great. If you invest a little bit more and they don't hit, that hurts more.
And if a team has fewer draft picks, do they have more in that space for undrafted free agents?
From what I recall during my time, no, it was so it wasn't like, hey, you can now sign a lot more. It's just like a general, like per team, like rookie salary cap pool, and so they could sign as many guys as they want. It's just you don't have unlimited resources for how you want to do your signing bonus money. And if you do overspend to others, you got to take it away from the guys that you drafted, and then that's a sensitive part.
And when these guys are asking you about things, you got them on the phone. Do they ever ask like, hey, how many receivers are you going to bring in? Or is it just so frantic that they don't really care about that?
Yeah. Oh, when a player asks like, hey, how many are you bringing in? I am like excited about that because I looked at the roster and it tells me like this is a player that gets it. This is a professional, and even if it's not on our side, like hey, we're bringing in 4 wideouts. But then if you're a good recruiter, you can go look at our roster though. It stinks. You have a good chance to make it. That's why we're bringing in 4 wideouts, and that's why we're calling you. So I do like it when a player can see past the signing bonus. Unfortunately, past the hard emotions of not getting drafted and ask insightful questions. In the heat of the moment, as they're getting anywhere from not only your phone call, but like possibly 5 other phone calls at that time.
And, Steve brought it up at the beginning of the show, some really amazing players that were undrafted free agents. How do teams miss on these undrafted free agents? What are the top 2 or 3 reasons why these guys just go undrafted?
A lot of it is just kind of opportunities to play, fits. Some of it could be medical, and a little bit of it is we just might have missed, and that happens. But the thing is, though, you might not have missed. You might have had your team could have possibly had a person with a draft grade as a guy like with 4th round draft pick grade, and he just goes through. Not every team's board is the same. So it's like, hey, this guy, and then if they end up making it, like we had him ranked high. We just didn't have like the roster availability for him, or we weren't going to offer the amount of money for the signing bonus part. So it doesn't feel like that you truly missed. But a lot of it is, how they were playing in college, along with like a possible injury situation, and then all the teams' boards being different.
So Frog, a question I have on that note, and this might be more of a unique circumstance, but I think about a recent free agent for the Bengals, an undrafted free agent that was highly productive, has evolved into a highly controversial NFL player, but Vontae's perfect. From what I can recall, all the talent in the world coming out of college, but the one thing that seemed to keep teams away from him and kept him from being drafted were, I guess, for a lack of a better term, character issues, right? A lot of personal fouls, not keeping his cool on the field. Is that a pretty unique circumstance, or no? Are those the type of things that do plant red flags, specifically with a high number of personal foul penalties? Is that common, or is that more unique, where teams will look at things like that are related to on the field play that will cause them to shy away from drafting a player?
Oh, spot on. A great example there, Steve. Like, yes, he's a perfect example of had the character items, whether it was on field, off field, or both. And that's why that's exactly why he wasn't drafted when you hear everybody talk. And like that does happen. And then it turns into an interesting argument like, hey, we won't draft the guy. And then when the draft is over and you see his talent ability card way up here, you're like, well, I think he suffered enough. Let's go ahead and sign him.
Hey, so Frog, and I'm sure this happens, but are there teams and coaches and GMs that will see an undrafted free agent, sign an undrafted free agent? They're clearly better than a guy that's been drafted, yet they cut that undrafted free agent because they don't want to cut, say, a 3rd or 4th round pick?
Absolutely. And then the other thing is you would have your fingers crossed that maybe that undrafted free agent, if you cut them, you can bring them onto your practice squad. But if it's very, very obvious, like this guy balled out so much in the preseason and he had a lot of good preseason film, you weren't able to hide him, then that's a tough decision that you'll make. But as far as to cut that 3rd, 4th rounder, or a guy that's, let's say, in his 2nd or 3rd year that was taken in anywhere from rounds 2 through 4, because that's still an ego hurt to cut somebody that's only been with you for a year or two. The teams definitely play that part. Like, we just gave all this guy all the signing bonus money, and we had a belief in him. And do we want to eat our losses? And if it's very obvious that the other player is better, those are tough discussions, and sometimes they'll cut that better player, that undrafted free agent, in the hopes that they can maybe get him on the practice squad and keep that other guy around.
And, we've seen all these behind the scenes, shows on HBO, the Hard Knocks and whatnot. But what are the really key moments when an undrafted free agent can make their case for making a team? When is it really important that they show what they're made of to be able to make that roster?
Yeah. So typically the way that it works out is they'll start doing well in practice, and then they'll continually do well in practice. When I say practice, when it gets to the organized team activities, but most importantly in two-a-days or in the practices in July and August, and they're doing well on that, and it's like, wow, this guy's showing the ability to do it. And then if they're able to reinforce it over and over again over the course of preseason games 1 through 3, and then also they have good film that other teams can see it, because if you're a scout on another team, you're going to watch those bottom roster players to see if they can make your team better. That's when it really, really matters for them. So they got to keep earning it. Like, this is a earn it league.
And when you're looking at those players, do they stand out right away? I mean, are you able to see a guy that was an undrafted free agent and within, a few practices? And then the second part of that question is how much difference is there between a first, second, or third round player and an undrafted free agent? Is it a 10% margin, a 20% margin, or is it such a slim margin that these guys have a pretty good chance if they just get a few breaks?
Yeah. So as far as seeing it right away, skill players a little bit easier than big guys. Big guys, they need to do it when they have the pads on, and it really counts. That part for big guys, I don't know how you can feel like, hey, this guy's going to make the team when they haven't had to play actual football in the months of June and then the very part of two-a-days. So skill guys a little bit sooner, but I never left. If we felt like we liked our roster, that an undrafted free agent was like making our team after after that rookie weekend. We all get excited about the rookie weekend, but a lot of it is just like false hope. And the other aspect, the margin of error, quite frankly, I think the first rounders really stand out athletically so much more than most undrafted free agents. So that is a huge difference. But it is a game of football, not a game of like just doing athletic drills. And it is over the course of playing those preseason or in-season games and so on, and then live scrimmage practices, to where you can see, all right, are they starting to like minimize that gap of it? And I've experienced it. I've experienced like guys able to kind of make that gap go a little bit more so. But first round, there's a huge difference to most undrafted free agents, barring personal things where they should have been drafted but they fell off.
And Frog, any stories about undrafted free agents that you scouted that you loved that ended up making a roster, making a difference and whatnot?
Well, I'm sure there's some. I'm kind of at a loss for some right now. Like maybe another time we'll talk about some guys that I signed that made the team I was excited about. And then other times like, we thought we were going to get them and we end up not getting them, and then they end up doing well. But off the top of my head, I can't think of any right now, but there's a lot out there. There really is. And it's going to be about 30% of NFL rosters are going to have guys with undrafted free agents. Now, the thing is, it's not so much that there's so much misses. You get a lot more throws at the dartboard. So when the draft is over, as you brought up, like people are going to sign anywhere from 10 to 20 undrafted free agents. And if they only have like 6 draft picks, they got a lot more chances of guys making that roster when you do it over the totality of the NFL. So when you look at your team, there are guys that are undrafted free agents. And if they're not your own personal undrafted free agents, they got their start as an undrafted free agent with another team.
And then as we kind of come to a close, the biggest thing right now is obviously, and we talked about in our last podcast, the coronavirus. How do you think that this limited scouting period, inability to really kind of bring players in and whatnot, will impact that part of this draft?
It has to, because of the physical part. If you're not able to get the physical on those players, you might be a little bit more hesitant to give them signing bonus money or to bring them in. And that's going to be I'm very interested on how teams are going to approach that, because they could possibly like be giving guys signing bonus money, and then they meet the doctors for the first time, and then they don't pass a physical, and then it's like, well, you're now gone. And again, like all the NFL teams, they have different standards for the physical aspect, so that part's hard. I think as far as the recruitment and all that, scouts, coaches have had nothing but time. Like, they don't have to drive to work; they're by themselves. I'm pretty sure they gave them the phone numbers, contact information to cultivate those relationships of those late round possible undrafted free agents. And I have a feeling that part's going to actually run kind of smooth. It'll be hell on earth for the contract salary guy, because he's going to be getting a million calls. He or she's going to be getting a million calls after the draft. And they can't personally just say no, filled. They have to take all those phone calls, or maybe they'll have a little bit of a system where two people take the phone calls in remote places via Zoom. But that part is going to be hard. But as far as cultivating the relationships, falling out your undrafted free agency part, I think that part is actually going to be a positive, that some people are going to really go, why didn't I create these relationships before in the past, and always complain about this day.
Awesome, Frog. That was great. Something, once again, that we kind of lift the curtain on that NFL guys and scouts know, but the normal fan doesn't get a chance to really experience that NFL undrafted free agency. I want to say thank you for Mike, the Frog, with Steve True North, and myself, Draft Doctor Johnny Kitchens. We are signing off. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.